You know, this ridiculous brand versus performance debate, which I find myself in twice a week with somebody. It's all fucking growth. We're in the growth business. You need to put water at the top of the well so that when the pump pumps at the bottom of the well, there's water there. That's the funnel. And whether that funnel is a 16-second journey or a 16-month journey is immaterial. You can't pump water from an empty well.
This is the Snarketing podcast for marketers by marketers, talking to marketers with just a touch of snark. Now, here are your hosts, Valerie Vespa and Matt Wurst.
Actually, Al, it's just me for the moment because Valerie is on a plane to Miami right now. She is heading to the Possible conference being held at the Fontainebleau. I don't know if it's the second or third annual, but last year has kind of made a splash when Linda Yaccarino was interviewing Elon Musk on stage, and then just probably weeks later, she was introduced as the new CEO. But Valerie and I talked about this. I am not heading there. I actually have some pre-existing obligations and commitments. She is heading there, as are many, many people. But most of the people I know who are going there are actually on the sell side, agency, ad tech. And neither of us really knew many brand people who were heading there. So it's going to be interesting to see if it's just like lots of sellers. I think of that like Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other. Is that what's going to happen? It's like, are you a buyer? Are you a buyer? Are you a brand? Who's what here? But we'll see. So I hope everyone has a great time. You know who else is going to be in Miami for Possible is today's guest. And we actually talked to Lou Paskalis a couple of weeks ago, but this episode is amazing. He is just a first ballot Hall of Famer in this industry. Everybody knows him. Everybody loves him. He has an opinion on everything, and they're like almost always right. It's pretty remarkable. But he is one of those people that everyone looks to when something is new or different or changes. And Valerie and I are going to jump in and talk to him. For those of you who are in Miami, Lou is there as well. He's on stage. I know he's hosting side events. So you're going to be Lou overwhelmed. But for everyone else, this is how you get your taste.
On this episode of the Snarketing podcast, the legend himself, Lou Paskalis, will bring his wealth of experience and expertise in the marketing and advertising world to the conversation. Trust me, this is one you won't want to miss. He's got a lot to say and share, so let's jump right in.
Hi, Lou. Welcome to the Snarketing podcast. How are you?
Just fine, Matt, today. Happy to be here. How are you today?
We are great, and we're even greater that you are here because I actually think that you are not only going to raise the level of conversation, but also just the status of this measly podcast because you are a first ballot ad tech marketing Hall of Famer. You are known, adored, loved by all. So we are honored to be in your presence.
Wow, you made me blush more than others. That's a hard bar. Thank you for all of that. I'll try to live up to that for your audience now.
You ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. So I think of you as an expert, a trusted voice, my Twitter, social media consigliere, a source on so many topics. A man who probably wears many hats, which is ironic because when I see you in places like Cannes, you're always wearing snazzy hats. But before we go back in time, your new role as Chief Strategy Officer at Adfontes Media, which, as I understand it, rates news and sources for just reliability and bias, right? Like,
Yeah.
What drew you to an organization like this? Is it just the times we live in?
I've been talking probably for about 15 years about advertisers' responsibility to support quality news journalism in America. I did it when I was American Express. I did it when I was Bank of America, speaking to places like the Boston Ad Club and really saying, look, there's an imperative here. In that same amount of time, while I've been extolling the virtues of news, there's been an 80% decline in advertising support in news in America. So clearly I'm having the opposite effect of what I want to. But, in seriousness, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's resulted in a 50% decline in people working in newsrooms. And, we work in an interesting industry, advertising. It gives us a unique purview into things, but it also gives us some responsibilities, right? Journalism is the only profession called out in the Constitution of the United States in the first article of the Bill of Rights for its unique role in keeping government accountable to the people. And it needs to be strong and resilient. And its strength and resiliency comes from advertising investments. And advertising investments in news reach the most influential and affluent audience of any vertical: sports, entertainment, lifestyle. And yet advertisers have pulled back because of these fears of getting caught up in the culture wars with the increasingly polarized country. And on top of that, we're in the midst of something that I never anticipated I would see in my lifetime, which is a war on truth. I remember when Kellyanne Conway stood on the White House lawn in the first few months of the previous president's term in office, and the president had said something that the facts didn't support. And a reporter pressed her on that, and she said, well, the president was using alternative facts. I went to Google, and I'm like, what are alternative facts, right? And I'm like, and now
it's called fiction. Fiction,
yeah,
right? Is that not the answer?
it is.
Is
But
that what I told you?
we have a generation of kids now who have grown up with this idea that facts are fungible, that you can always find facts to support your position, that truth maybe isn't so important. And I never thought we'd see ourselves there. And so with Ad Fontes Media, it was a mission that I frankly, and don't tell my CEO this, but I would have done it for free because I believe passionately in it. But it's given me a platform to go around and speak at industry events and really kind of educate marketers, not, again, just to the civic responsibility that they hold in doing this, but also the business value at driving growth when you add news back into your plan. And one of the things I'm finding is that oftentimes the CEO is completely unaware that their company is no longer supporting news. And many times the CMO is not aware that they're blocking news. And so there's an education opportunity here to say, hey, news is important. Did you realize you're not supporting it? Hey, could you change that?
So is like the value prop just like further investment in news sources, or like how do you think marketers should be capitalizing on this, like besides just
I
saying
love
like,
that question, Valerie. And here's how I would answer it. You buy a cupcake. The cupcake is composed of two fundamental things: some cake and some icing. But you buy a cupcake, which means you have to rationalize why you bought the cupcake. And let's say you have to rationalize it to a CFO. The CFO doesn't care about civic responsibility, doing the right thing, and eating your vegetables. He or she wants to know the ROI on the cupcake, right? Did it drive our business? Did we get good value for money? Did we reach new audiences who purchase things? The icing is your employees, your shareholders, and your customers are going to love you for supporting news. Now get out there and create some content with your CEO about how the company is committed to supporting news. So we flipped the narrative. The narrative was do your civic responsibility. And oh, by the way, there's some value here. But we're now basically saying there's real value here. And by the way, you get the benefit from a reputational standpoint.
Well, you had me at cupcake, but as someone who is a fan of the cupcake, I can tell you that there are both short-term and long-term impacts of eating those cupcakes. One is an instant high and gratification, and the other may be if you have too many over time, you begin to look like now how I look. So the question to flip that back from a marketing perspective is, in our industry, in our ecosystem, people don't always stay in one place for very long. Certainly at a C-level, CMO, average tenure, we know with the data there. Does it sometimes not matter what the long-term impact is because they're not going to be around to see the lasting effects of the short-term win and potentially longer-term damage? Is that part of the issue? And can that be fixed?
That's a really great question. You guys are two for two. Here's what I think about that. I
It's
always,
all downhill from here, by the way. That's
yeah,
it.
well,
We should just stop
yeah,
this right here.
it's over, right? So I think it's actually, a question of jujitsu. In jujitsu, you determine your opponent's weakness and you make it, you determine your opponent's strength and you make it their weakness.
Mhm.
And so I think the short tenure requires the marketer to hone her narrative much more quickly. I'm being brought in to change these things. I'm going to drive this innovation agenda. We're going to do things differently. And one of the things I'm going to do is to reintroduce news into our portfolio of media, right? Everybody needs to craft a winning narrative. In addition to Adfontes Media, where I'm chief strategy officer, I work with 13 other companies that are clients of mine in my consultancy. And in every case, if you boil my contribution down, it's honing their narrative. How can you basically articulate your vision in a way that creates followership for it? And in marketing, because of the average tenure of the CMO, which is now down to 16 months, to your point, Matt, you need to get fast followership. You need people to go intuitively, yeah, that makes sense to me. I believe that. We're zigging when everybody else is zagging. So I actually think it's an opportunity to get in there and say, look, you need to put 5 things on an agenda to get the rest of the C-suite behind you and your employees and, kind of go out in the marketplace and tell the story. Let me give you one.
This is super interesting. I mean, I think we want to like take it a step back for a second and go like you're now consulting, which is amazing. We kind of want to hear about that. But your tenure is a highlight reel of major big brand experiences like American Express, Bank of America, and then like 15 or so years in the wine
That's right.
business as
That's
well,
right.
which
Yeah.
sounds very interesting. So tell us like what is, your secret sauce, so to speak, for keeping these giants happy and not turning into a corporate yes man,
Yeah.
continuously innovating.
Well, my first 15 years with E&J Gallo was interesting. It was a family-held company for many of those years. It was run by Ernest Gallo, and you were basically going to one individual and saying, "Do you believe in this idea?" And I loved the decision-making apparatus. But if you brought him something that was worth $1 and you told him that you got it for 2 cents, he would ask, "Why didn't you get it for a penny?" I learned, how an entrepreneur thinks from Ernest Gallo. I learned value. He insisted that unless you're in the room when a deal is done, you don't know what happened. And I had a great media agency in New York, but I had to come to New York and sit with all the vendors and the agency on every deal. So I was spending 100 room nights in Manhattan at the Hilton on 53rd and 6th. And I realized as I talked to agency people and vendors, and this is the 90s, that very few clients actually meet with vendors and very few clients spend time with agencies. It's all outsourced. And that has gotten a lot worse in the digital era because you could count the vendors in that era. Now you can't. But I found that it made me smarter. It found that it actually allowed me to drive innovation because I could say, well, could you actually do the show around our wine brand, or could you incorporate I remember when I pitched Martha Stewart Living, would you ever consider doing your Thanksgiving episode at one of our vineyards in California? And the incremental cost of that was to get Martha Stewart a private jet between New York and San Francisco. That was it. They didn't ask for more money or whatever. So I learned that when you're talking directly to the vendor instead of through an intermediary, you can make the impossible possible. And that was really what I learned Gallo was the biggest advertiser in the industry, but that said they didn't have big budgets, right? So we were able to leverage that. I came to American Express and I learned a couple of things. American Express is the brand, where Gallo is not the brand. When I was at Gallo, there were 77 brands in the portfolio. There are now over 200. Most don't carry the Gallo name. But American Express was singularly the brand. And because of that, the CMO, John Hayes, and the CFO, Ken Chenault, were connected at the hip. There was no daylight between the CEO agenda and what the brand did. And it imbued itself in customer service. When the tsunami hit Southeast Asia, frontline customer service reps were booking helicopters to pick American Express customers off the roofs of hotels that they couldn't get out on the bottom floor because they were under 12 feet of water. They weren't getting authorization to do that. They were doing that. Why? Because of the brand ethos. I also learned that decisioning in corporate America is like a unicorn. A decision is a mythical beast that roams the hallways that no one ever actually sees. And when you get a decision in corporate America, it's like winning a lottery ticket. And then I saw something extraordinary. I was fortunate to participate in Small Business Saturday. In the first year, between the day that the idea came up and the day we were in the market, there was 18 days. And we had a very empowered president of the Small Business Division, Susan Sabat, and she put one of her executives that had already retired, Rosa Sabater, in charge. And every day we had a meeting that looked like NASA when they launch a rocket. Creative, are you ready? Media, are you ready? Legal, are you on board? Go, 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 go. And I found out, wow. And we were a little desperate. The world was changing, right? So I know the story's getting longer than the answer warrants, but I found out the power of mission. And mission matters in corporate America. If I'm part of a mission, we'll run through walls, right? And then I'll just round out with Bank of America. What I learned is and this is what I do today, the importance of narrative, because you're evangelizing something across 250,000 employees, all of whom think they understand media, all of whom have an opinion based on their 15-year-old son or daughter and what they're using, and think we should be advertising on that. So each part of the journey puts something in my portfolio that I'm now able to use today, and I'm really grateful that I had that journey.
In many ways, then, you might be a microcosm for marketing as a whole, right? There's a lot of talk about how the changing role of marketing and the ecosystem requires all these skills and tools added to your belt like Batman. But like the scope of marketing is innovation, it's technology, it's analytics, it's creative. How do you see the scope evolving from here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, so the Mad Men era was an integrated marketing approach to the outside world. Everything happened in one shop. The skills were all rolling up to one CEO, and the client solution was seamlessly integrated. And then we came up with the idea of siloing specialty agencies. So you had a creative agency over here, you had a digital agency over there, you had an experiential agency over here, you had a strat planning agency over here, and you had a traditional agency, and add in everything else, a talent agency. And that worked for a while because the planning cycle, I used to make the joke, corporate America has a 13-month annual planning cycle, which is, ludicrous. And there was an assembly line, and it moved with a cadence. We're going to need 90 days for the creative to, get ready, and then we'll start doing our channel plan based on what we see. And then we got into this area about 5 or 6 years ago where we started to move to agile, where we created a scrum-like object where everybody sort of came back together, but it was like watching 5-year-olds play soccer. It was frenetic. Yeah, it kind of got tactical versus strategic very quickly, and it was an era where everything was slavishly, connected to social media. And I think now we've come through the other side with things like audience-based planning, outcome-based planning, and the need to what I call engineer relevance into every interaction. The biggest dynamic that has changed in my career, and all credit to Rob Norman, former head of digital for Group M, attention can no longer be bought, it must be earned. And that is one of the most, and he said it to me in the back of a cab on a rainy night on the way to a dinner somewhere. And his next line was, by the way, in his perfectly British accent, therefore, I think I shall retire. And he did. And I was just so struck by that because, we used to trade attention for access. We'd watch a set of commercials in order to see the originally, produced scripted content. But now we have SVOD. We have all sorts of means to skip ads or avoid ads, whatever it might be. So now I've got to basically create stopping power in the feed. I've got to actually do something that has the ability to stop the thumb. And the only way to do that is to be able to leverage data and insights in real time, append that to the messaging portfolio I have, and traffic something out programmatically in a 30 millisecond round trip. Now, you can't blink your eyes in 30 milliseconds. It's faster than that. And so what that means is we need to build a real-time engine that accesses all the leverageable first-party insights I have, connects it to context signal that I might have from the experience, and assemble something that we used to refer to as DCO, Dynamic Creative Optimization, out of component pieces to put an ad or a piece of content in front of people in that feed so they go, whoa, that's really interesting. I'm going to read it.
But it's still paid and earned. It's not an or, right? You still need to pay, whether it's the creative and, working, non-working ratio might change a little bit. I don't think there really is. I think earned is on top of paid at this point.
I agree.
Is that not the
I
case?
agree 100%.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Let's talk about those shifts. That's a great segue, Matt. If you give me a couple seconds, there's only a couple of them. We used to plan our share of requirements, which is the old school media term for, I need to reach people 45 times in 90 days to sell my new product. How am I going to do that on a reach frequency planning basis? And we started with linear TV because it was the elephant in the room. And we said, okay, that's only going to get us 75% of our reach. So let's fill in with these other things. Let's fill in with radio. Let's fill in with out of home. There's this new digital thing over here. Maybe I'll try some of that stuff, and skywriting because I'm a crazy man. Now we plan based on addressable versus not addressable. How much of our audience can we reach in an addressable universe like CTV, like all the other places and spaces where I can deliver video in an addressable environment? And maybe that'll get me to 30% of my share requirements. Nowhere near what linear could do in its heyday. But now I plan around that, right? And I plan video first, non-addressable, and then non-video, non-addressable out that. So we flipped the planning model to addressable, and we put digital in the center, including things like CTV. People come up with all these, well, is CTV digital? Yes. Is mobile digital? Yes. Is search digital? Yes. Is social digital? Yes, God damn it. It's all freaking addressable. Thank you. And then the non-addressable. Okay. And then to your point about, I had an amazing experience at Bank of America with creator economy content. We were getting really nice digital content that conformed to our brand guidelines and was doing great with digital audiences. But we really wanted to resonate with diverse audiences, underprivileged audiences. We had an education product about finances that was really designed to help people who were struggling with them be better with their money, and all sorts of other specialty audiences, right? LGBTQ, whatever it might be. And the agency struggled triangulating between our brand guidelines, which were very rigid, and what the audience wanted. And so we brought in, we had a big strategic partnership with Twitter. They had a creator platform called Art House. And we brought in the person who ran Art House, who coincidentally happened to be my strategic communications planner at American Express. And so she understood like the insanity of Lou. Yeah, you know her, Stacey Monero. I can see your face, Matt.
Stacey, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you know Stacey.
I didn't know she worked with you before that. That's great.
Oh, yeah. No, she was the strat planner that would always go in and explain stuff to John Hayes. And I would, just whatever she said, I came up with it, honest. But anyhow, so that built into, a huge 8-figure piece of business over time. Why? Because she was bringing creators in that served these audiences, knew how to talk to them, we threw out the brand guidelines, and ultimately they were getting 10x the engagement of our agency produced creative because they understood their audiences. And I was getting it as a value add on a media buy that I did with Mactorella, and he'd say, yeah, you're going to give me that much money. You can have all the creative stuff you want. The only issue we ran into, and it's a big issue. So the woman who ran creative, who happened to be one of my best friends at Bank of America, said, you're kind of crossing the line here because you're the media guy. I run brand, and you got these people creating, brands. She's like, so it just so happened that was right before Cannes. And I arranged through a friend who had one of those, Sunday boat trips to Saint-Tropez that are, basically little boozy trips before everything starts. For the
Where
two
all the
of
magic
them,
happens, though. That's where the magic happens to anyone listening.
Yeah. So I got the two of them on the boat, and I just let them sit together. And I have a photograph of the two of them sitting there, Stacy with her laptop on her lap, and Michelle similarly attired, and they're looking at her computer the whole freaking boat trip over to Saint-Tropez. And that was when Michelle got really comfortable with somebody not at her agency, not working for her, doing creative. And so the next thing that happens, we start bringing the damn creators to the briefing with the agencies. And the agencies are like, who are all those people that don't look like us on the other end of the room? And we're like, they're the creators. And we had great things happen. One of the great things that happened is one of the creators said, yeah, I don't want to do this, and walked out in the middle of the meeting. Fantastic. Fantastic. I never want you to do something you don't believe, right? So it was an amazing experience. And it was one of those that happened semi-organically. But I will tell you, the power of a creator to serve an audience is far greater than a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think agencies are going to have to wrestle with that because the efficiency, the alleged efficiency, is standardization, commoditization, brand guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. But we've trained consumers to ignore all that. And now we've got to compete for attention with something that looks like it was made for them. Whether it's an ad or whether it's a piece of content, I don't think matters as much anymore. It just needs to be compelling.
Is that so? I mean, you've danced between B2B and B2C, or B2B2C and other lettered acronyms. Is what you're talking about here in terms of the creator space and that evolution and the convergence of media and tech and erasing the lines that exist, is that easier or harder in B2B or B2C? Does it matter at this point, or are those lines kind of disappearing because we're all just talking to each other on LinkedIn?
I think, I don't know that I have a smart answer for that or even an insightful answer, but what I will say is what it's harder for is for the KPIs on the marketing organization that drive a number of things, including bonuses, right? So, let's just take the creator economy example. The KPI for the agency is, did the creative drive outcomes? Well, they were responsible for the overall strategy. The creator piece fit into that strategy. It played a role. They didn't create that creative, but it did benefit the strategy. So who gets the incremental bonus there? Same for the employee.
For the credit, yeah.
Yeah, right. Same for the employee. The chief brand officer who worked for the chief marketing officer is like, well, I run brand and I really wasn't directly involved in that, but I still, So I think the silos benefited accountability for sure. And as you said, Matt, credit. And I think we have to get back to this idea of one team, one dream. And, figuring out like within an organization, all right, these 3 or 4 individuals were responsible for the innovation. These 3 or 4 were responsible for the execution, and the rest of the ecosystem benefited it. So the 8 individuals I highlighted here get something special. It is messy from an accounting standpoint now.
But it's not just, and I know Valerie is itching to jump in with a question, but and as an external partner, vendor, agency, whoever, I've been all of it, knowing who the right stakeholder is, who can be that internal champion to bring all those people together is, it's a fucking nightmare. Pardon my non-can French, but sometimes I have to have 10 meetings to get people to internally talk to each other. and I'm losing time, right? I'm not getting
Yeah.
any younger here,
Oh,
guys.
I
So
actually think it's
how do we
worse than
fix
that.
that?
Well, let's refine. Let's take the problem statement one step farther, and then we'll talk about how we fix it. So when I started in the business, the CMO was responsible for things like experiences, um, responsible for things like driving growth, responsible for analytics usually. And fast forward to today, you have a chief growth officer, a chief analytics officer, a chief experience officer, and they sit as peers to the CMO. So the CFO says to the chief growth officer, if I gave you $100 million, what could you do? Oh, I could deliver 38 million incremental unit sales. Wow. And then, he says to the CMO, what could you do? And she says, well, I could drive relevance and favorability by 7 points and actually move the needle on who's changing for the better. And, the CFO is going, okay, I don't know what she just said, but this dude's going to give me 38 million more widgets. Oh, he's getting 100 million. So it's now a team of rivals, if you get the Doris Kearns Goodwin book reference about Lincoln's cabinet, at the
I
leadership
think
table. Yeah, it's
no,
a
it's
team
just a
of
great
rivals.
example. The cabinet evolution is crazy
Yeah,
because George Washington's first cabinet, he had 3 people:
yeah,
War, Treasury, and Secretary of State, and that was
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Now we got secretaries of secretaries.
And they're all competing for the same dollar. They're all
Yeah,
competing for the same dollar, and it's a zero-sum game. And marketing has been gutted because analytics itself, she could have said 10 years ago, well, we see that our marketing stimulus is driving growth, but the way that attribution works in the company, and I'm talking marketing attribution, not media attribution, right?
mm-hmm.
This happened to me all the time. People would go into a retail banking center and say, I want that credit card I saw on TV. So the banking center would sign the person up. They would get 100% of the credit for the sale, and the TV that, we ran got 0%. Times a jillion, that's a problem because we should put more money into recarpeting banking centers than on TV. You know what I mean? And marketing doesn't get credit for what marketing drives. Marketing competes for the dollars that it used to get, and marketing drives 50% of the global economy. So if you back off of marketing, you create a global recession. And we're seeing that today. 46% of companies today no longer have a CMO because they're not clear that that role is additive to their business outcome. And CMOs have to change their game too, because all the CMO cares about is how are your efforts contributing to my growth agenda? And you know what we go to them with? We go to them with Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. And it's because we're talking marketing speak. And one of the things we have to level up is how does all the stuff that we do uniquely well, that is a craft, that is a skill, uniquely drive the outcomes you seek. And unfortunately, as Sir Martin calls it, there's short-termitis. What most of the CFOs want is in this quarter. And CMOs are doing something that's much more akin to customer lifetime value. And unfortunately, that CLV isn't as discreetly measured or equally well explained.
I feel like we need to do
No,
training for CFOs and CMOs. Like CMOs and
yeah,
CFOs both need to understand each other's languages better.
yeah. They don't have
That's
a
our
common
next
love
company.
language. They don't have a common love language.
Right.
Yeah, and by the way, the name of that company, Matt, when we decided to open, is called Growth Incorporated. Because the only uniting, this ridiculous brand versus performance debate, which I find myself in twice a week with somebody. It's all fucking growth. We're in the growth business. You need to put water at the top of the well so that when the pump pumps at the bottom of the well, there's water there. That's the funnel. And whether that funnel is a 16-second journey or a 16-month journey is immaterial. You can't pump water from an empty well. Delivering growth requires a unified approach to marketing. Am I allowed to say the F-bomb or no?
Yes.
I've already said it several times,
Okay.
so
All right.
I can't stop
Sorry.
you.
Go ahead.
That was a mic drop moment, I feel like. how many minutes are we in? I feel like that was a
Well,
great way to end.
there's your teaser. There's your teaser right there. It's all fucking
The
growth.
yeah.
So let's switch a little bit to I was perusing your LinkedIn, and I implore our audience to connect with you and follow you because you are a wealth of information,
Thank you.
and you're a vocal critic of some industry practices. So what is one thing that you'd like to change about the current state of marketing and advertising outside of what we just talked about? If you had a
I
magic wand.
I think broadly speaking, the recognition that the way forward is transparency in all things, right? We're coming into an era where I think very rapidly major marketers are going to realize that the $100 million they just spent building their CDP is going to have to be rethought in a privacy by design standard. And that is not compliance by design, for example. Compliance by design is the low road. It's like, well, what are we required to do? And unfortunately, because of a weird boomerang effect of GDPR, which was designed to unify a standard in Europe, which it technically didn't, we now have, because we couldn't produce a national privacy standard, because I don't know if you guys heard, but Congress is dysfunctional. I'm not sure if that's on your radar. We now, every state, passing their own privacy legislation, which is leading to a balkanization of states. And the only way to really navigate that in a durable, sustainable way is to say, you know what? We have a contract with our customers to always respect their privacy expectations. And one of the things I really loved about Bank of America was that our standard was just because we have the permission to do something doesn't mean we should. It was brutal because it's subjective. I had people on my team that were like, well, we have the permission. I'm like, yeah, but is it reasonable for the consumer to expect us to use that permission in this way? For example, you give us permission to use your data in some, aggregate way to do modeling. But maybe the consumer didn't realize what that was. And so we would have really interesting, endless debates about that. And there was really, getting to consensus was hard, but it made us better. And I think that's the way forward because you have a covenant with marketers. And as Keith Weed, the former CMO of Unilever, would say, trust comes in on foot, but it leaves on horseback. And, if you're in a banking business, which I would argue is entirely about trust, and you make really shitty decisions over here about people's privacy, then it makes people question, well, what are they doing with my money? Are they good stewards of it? And I love that because we were the gold standard of that. And I'm very, very proud of that. And it made every day hard, but it made ensuring that we had the right reputation easy.
Do you think the acceleration of technology, and I'm making air quotes for our listener, is that making this idea of transparency and trust better from a consumer and brand relationship? Or, I guess more a macro question in this case, if we're talking about technology, with the rise of the RMN CTV industrial complex, what and where is technology going to change things next? And if your answer, by the way, is like AI, can you give me like more specific answers as to what type of tool or technology is going to make this trust relationship better?
So we got 37 minutes in before AI came up, and I'm really applauding that. Well done. You actually went in a different direction than I thought you would, because I thought we were going to go to AI. I love the fact that you went to RMNs and CTV. This is a very important symbiotic relationship. Every marketer seems to be carrying boxes of money to retail media networks saying, please take this. I'm not entirely convinced that's the best move, but I understand why. High quality first party data, down funnel, and logged in. What we like to say, highly permissed. The permissions are there. The problem is that RMNs have very little inventory in the aggregate. They're nowhere near the amount of inventory that the industry would need to continue to drive the business, and it's down funnel. And so they've gone and created these partnerships with CTV. CTV also has first party data. They're also logged in. They're also highly permissed. And now I get an up funnel component and a down funnel component where I have an ID mechanism where I can actually see the purchase journey from first stimulus to ultimate purchase for the endemic products in the RMNs. And there's a lot of RMNs. It's not just,
So the
grocery
answer is
stores and Walmart.
blockchain, by the way, right? Is
I
blockchain
don't,
not the answer to
I,
solve all that? No. Sorry, didn't mean to derail you. I know how much you love that topic.
So with this symbiotic relationship between RMNs and CTV, you now have an environment where you can actually test, learn, and model, right? So how many upper funnel stimuli do I need before a down funnel outcome? How do I bring in other data sets into this, highly permissed environment so I can enrich the experience? How do I use the down funnel stuff to sell other stuff if I'm already reaching one of my customers who is a frequent consumer? If they're already buying Pampers 3 times a week, you don't want to show them the Pampers ad. You want to show people who aren't buying Pampers the Pampers ad, right? The movable middle, as we call it. So there's a lot of business opportunity there. And I think that will help with trust because consumers are already in a relationship with Netflix. They're already in a relationship with Walmart. They trust them with their business and a lot of other information. They've opted in. There's a zero-party data strategy there that enriches that data through things like sweepstakes and, other things they get access to. But it still doesn't scale. So you still have to find other means. But as long as you have enough data for modeling, you don't need identity in the rest of the world. So the cookie deprecation issue is not an enormous problem, in my opinion. If you're learning from other means and then using modeling to identify cohorts, less about their socioeconomic status. Most segmentations today are binary, which means if you're a multi-homeowner, you couldn't possibly also be a world traveler because those are two different segments. It's insane. It's insane. But what you can do dynamically with the kind of modeling I'm talking about now is actually combine those things in 3 other things that are not intuitive but are very predictive and recognize that is your sweet spot for incremental growth. Now let's go where you went, Matt, which is AI. AI as it exists today is the greatest single crisis opportunity I've ever seen in media. And I've used that term in the past, but with never more fervor and conviction than today. It will allow marketers to do what I just said more efficiently and at scale in a way that is going to, open up segmentation of very small cohorts, segment sizes approaching 1 because of its ability to divine the things that are important to this privacy compliant, anonymized individual that are not important to this individual. But the problem is marketers all are racing because of pressure from the CEO to go and build AI solutions without putting the right governance solutions in place. And I don't want to be the fear monger, but it's as close as we're probably ever going to come to the day that Skynet went live in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Terminator, right? We're going to start doing things and not realizing we're doing them with the AI. And in many cases, marketers have used the alleged recession to reduce the number of people working in marketing in favor of what the AI will do in the future, but you still need that subject matter expertise to train and govern the AI. And I don't think enough of them are thinking about it. And the thing I learned at Bank of America is governance overall. If you don't have good governance, you don't have a business, right? And it's just that simple. And governing AI is going to be a very big growth industry once marketers realize how bad they upped it up.
Well, on that positive note, I wonder if it makes sense for us now to turn the tables and move to the lightning round. Can we do that?
I'm ready.
Because, Lou, I will tell you, we probably prepared 30 questions for you, knowing we would get to 20, and you covered all of them in like maybe 10. So that speaks to your efficiency as well as your data and insights-driven capabilities to make content on the fly. So thank you for that. let's go. Lightning
Let's
round.
do it.
First question. Question number one, what is your favorite wine right now?
A Gevrey Chambertin from the north part of Burgundy. I'm obsessed.
Okay, I'm excited to see how the transcript spits that one out. That'll be fun to see.
I can go get a bottle. I can go get a bottle off my rack if you want, but that would kill the
I
lightning
could Google it. I want to see if the AI is keeping up with your wine predilections. With your experience in media and advertising, what's one trend you've seen come and go that you kind of secretly wish would come back?
Experiential media, where you actually create stunts that are out of standard.
And what about a popular consumer behavior trend that you'd like to see go away?
Posting on TikTok. Can I count that as a prediction?
Sure, because we will timestamp this and having recorded it on this date. What is a marketing campaign that you kind of secretly wish, or maybe not so secretly wish, that you'd been a part of, and why?
A marketing campaign that, of all companies, Google did called Dear Sophie, which was built around the child growing up over time and then and seeing the things they Google and seeing her go from an infant to graduating school. It's still, there's a 2.5 minute version of that still chokes me up.
What is the first media platform you go to or content that you consume first thing in the morning?
Well, it was Twitter, but it no longer is. I read a guy named John Ellis, which is a paid subscription, first thing out of bed. And it's a newsletter where he has an insatiable appetite for information, and he curates like 20 articles and then summarizes them. So you can read the summary or then click onto the article on Wall Street Journal, on New York Times, on a lot of other publications that you don't know the name of. And every day, like when it's late, I'm dying. I'm dying.
Our last question for the incredibly brilliant Lou Paskalis. If you were not in marketing, what alternate universe career would you have pursued?
I think that I would have loved to be an executive producer on movies. If you watch Wag the Dog, which is a 25-year-old movie about a fake war with Albania, there's a character in the movie, Dustin Hoffman, played by Dustin Hoffman, excuse me, and he's the producer of basically a fake series of events that are trying to obfuscate some presidential indiscretions until the election. And they gin up a war with Albania. And he literally produces artifacts of, the poor girl running out of the rubble carrying the dog, and it's all green screen. And I'm happiest when I'm asked to do something in 5 minutes involving an idea. Because I can spew out 90 ideas, 5 of which are good and 85 of which are horrible. But I'll still take that batting average. So movie producer is my answer.
That in this industry, that's why you are a Hall of Famer, because it only takes a few good ideas to put you on the map and then to build a career around. But you have given us more good ideas in these 40 plus minutes.
This is a pleasure.
We could have ever bargained for. So thank you for the generosity of your time, Lou. We appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you at the next event to be determined in one of your cool, funky hats. But until then, where and how can people find you? On the socials? What do you want to plug?
Yeah, I love to plug for my LinkedIn feed. I've been really aggressively publishing there. I still use X, but I publish predominantly about Formula One and things in my life, as opposed to business stuff. I've switched that over to LinkedIn. I wear the hats because I'm now bald and I don't want to burn my head. I don't like wearing hats.
Believe me, that may be the greatest lesson I learned from you. Is the first time I was in Cannes, first day, however many years ago, sunburn on the head, and then I spent €50 for a $4 hat on the beach. So now I
bring my own hats, and I bring a bunch because they're a lot cheaper when you're not buying them in Cannes.
Well, we will put a cap on this episode by saying thank you and wishing you all the best in your travels. And we look forward to learning lots more from all that you have to share on your channel. So thanks again.
Well, I want to
Thank
thank you,
you.
Valerie, and you, Matt. This was delightful. It went by so quick, I can't believe it. And I love the wide-ranging conversation. I feel the only thing missing is a glass of wine or a cup of coffee in front of us, but it's there virtually. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come on your podcast, and I wish you the very best.
Wow, does your brain hurt? Because I can feel the energy waves and smell the scent of hot brilliance emanating. That's what Lou Paskalis brings with him everywhere he goes. And he sure brought the heat on this one. Thanks Lou, Val, and Matt. And thanks to our amazing listeners. See you next time on the Snarketing Podcast.